The frozen river looked like nothing more than silence, a sheet of glass swallowed by snow. Everyone said it was too late, that no one could survive beneath that ice. But Daniel knew better. His canine, Shadow, wasn't digging for nothing. Each frantic claw, each bark that split the winter air, meant someone was still down there, waiting. And when Daniel pressed his hand to the ice, he heard it too, a muffled cry. The river had always been Miller's Creek's lifeline, wide, steady, a mirror of the seasons. But in winter, it became something else. A glass grave. Snow drifted silently across its frozen surface, masking the danger beneath. To anyone else, it looked peaceful, untouched. But Daniel felt the wrongness in the air. He trudged along the bank, boots crunching, breath fogging like smoke in the bitter cold. Shadow, his German shepherd, padded ahead, nose twitching. His tail was stiff, his body taut. He wasn't sniffing for rabbits or foxes. This was different. His ears pricked forward, catching sounds the storm couldn't hide. Daniel adjusted the rope clip to the dog's harness. "Easy, boy. What do you hear?" The shepherd froze, paw lifting mid-step. His head cocked. Then he lunged forward, barking furiously at the ice. Daniel sprinted after him, heart hammering. "Shadow!" The dog skidded to a stop on the frozen surface, claws scraping, muzzle pressed to the ice. His barks echoed across the empty banks, desperate and sharp. He clawed frantically, snow spraying in arcs. Daniel dropped to his knees beside him, pressing his gloved hand to the ice. At first, nothing. Just silence, the dull groan of the river shifting beneath the freeze. Then, he heard it. A muffled cry. So faint it could have been the wind. But it wasn't. It was the sound of life trapped beneath. Daniel's throat tightened. "God!" Shadow barked louder, paws tearing, body frantic. He turned his eyes up to Daniel, as if begging, "Help me break it." Daniel yanked his radio. Static filled his ears. The storm had cut the signal. No help was coming. It was just him, his dog, and the ice. He dropped his pack, pulling free the short axe strapped to its side. He struck the ice once, twice, each blow ringing like gunfire. Cracks spiderwebbed across the surface. Water hissed through. The cry came again. This time Daniel could make out words, muffled and broken, "Please, help." Shadow threw himself forward, claws striking the cracks, barking with savage urgency. His paws bled against the frozen shards, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Daniel shouted through clenched teeth, swinging harder. "Hold on. We're here." The ice groaned, sagging, ready to collapse. Cold spray burst through the cracks, soaking his gloves, biting like knives. Emily. The name struck his mind like lightning. He knew who it was now. The missing girl. Everyone said the river had claimed her yesterday. Searchers had walked away shaking their heads. But Shadow had heard what they hadn't. And now Daniel heard it too. He slammed the axe down again, Shadow digging beside him, both of them fighting the frozen grave. The storm above screamed, furious at being defied. But beneath the ice, a small hand pressed against the crack, pale, trembling, reaching. Daniel shouted hoarsely. "She's alive." The cracks spread like veins, groaning louder with every strike of the axe. The frozen surface trembled beneath Daniel's knees, threatening to give way at any second. Water hissed through the widening fractures, spraying his gloves and stinging like acid. Shadow's barks split the air, echoing across the riverbanks. He clawed at the ice with bleeding paws, snow and shards flying. He didn't care about the pain. His entire body screamed one command: dig. Faster. Daniel swung again, the axe blade biting deep. A chunk of ice snapped free, water rushing upward. For the briefest instant, he saw her face beneath, the pale outline of a child's features distorted by the rippling current. Her hand pressed against the fracture, small fingers trembling. "Emily!" Daniel shouted, his breath tearing raw. "I see you. Hold on." Her eyes flickered open beneath the water, wide and terrified. Bubbles spilled from her lips, the faintest sound breaking through, cold. Shadow howled, a sound torn from somewhere primal, then slammed his entire weight onto the ice. The sheet groaned violently, cracking deeper. Daniel slammed the axe down again, his arms screaming with effort. "Come on!" The surface finally gave. The ice collapsed inward with a thunderous crack, water exploding upward in a violent surge. The current clawed at Daniel instantly, freezing and relentless, trying to pull him under. He jammed his arm down through the jagged opening, fingers groping wildly. Nothing. Empty water. His lungs burned with panic. He shoved deeper, water pouring down his sleeve, cutting into his flesh like knives. Then, contact. Tiny fingers brushed his. Weak, trembling. Alive. "I've got you!" Daniel roared, his voice hoarse. He locked his hand around her wrist and yanked upward. The current fought back, dragging her deeper, but he refused to let go. Shadow lunged forward, teeth sinking into the back of Daniel's coat, anchoring him against the pole. His growls rattled like thunder, claws scraping ice as he dug in. Daniel pulled with every ounce of strength he had left. Slowly, agonizingly, the girl's arm broke the surface, then her shoulder, her face gasping violently as it cleared the water. "Breathe!" Daniel shouted. "You're out, Em. Breathe!" She coughed, choking, spitting water, her lips blue, but air filled her lungs. Her eyes fluttered weakly, dazed but alive. Shadow barked furiously, tail whipping, as if urging Daniel to keep going. He heaved her fully onto the ice, wrapping her in his parka, pressing her against his chest. The current snapped at his legs, nearly dragging him down with her, but Shadow yanked harder, pulling them both back towards solid ice. Daniel collapsed onto the frozen surface, Emily clutched tight in his arms. She shivered violently, whispering through chattering teeth. "Don't let me go." Daniel pressed his cheek to her wet hair, whispering back, "I won't." "Neither will he." Shadow curled against them both, pressing warmth into her, his body trembling but unyielding. His bleeding paws stained the snow, but his eyes stayed locked on the river, daring it to try again. The storm howled overhead, furious at losing what it had claimed. The river groaned, swallowing its broken surface. But the girl was no longer beneath. She was in their arms, clinging, breathing, whispering life back into the frozen silence. Daniel exhaled hard, his chest shaking. "She's out." "Shadow, you did it." The shepherd licked the girl's face, his tail thumping once, slow and heavy, as if sealing the vow. For the first time since the cry beneath the ice, Daniel believed. They had ripped her from the river's grip. And now, no storm would take her again. Daniel's arms burned as he dragged Emily further from the river's edge. The ice groaned beneath his knees, threatening to crack again, but he didn't stop until he reached the solid bank. Snow crunched under his boots as he collapsed to the ground, Emily pressed tightly against his chest. Her body was frighteningly cold, limp, lips blue, breath shallow and broken. Hypothermia was already sinking its claws into her. "Stay with me, Em," Daniel whispered, voice raw. "Don't let go now. Not after we pulled you out." Shadow pressed against them both, his fur soaked and his paws bleeding, but his warmth was steady. He licked Emily's cheek, nudging her with his nose, whining low as if urging her not to drift away. Daniel pulled off his soaked parka, wrapping it tighter around her. He stripped off his gloves, pressing her tiny hands between his own. His teeth chattered, but he forced himself to focus. Cold could kill fast, faster than drowning. Emily's lips trembled, her voice barely audible. So cold. Daniel lowered his forehead to hers. I know. But listen, Shadow won't let you freeze. He's your fire now. The shepherd curled closer, wrapping his body protectively around the girl, pressing every ounce of heat he had into her. His eyes glowed in the dim stormlight, unblinking, fierce. Daniel glanced around desperately. The open riverbank offered no shelter. The storm would strip the heat from them in minutes. He spotted the faint outline of a collapsed boathouse, its frame half buried in snow. He looked at Shadow. Trail. Shelter. The shepherd barked once and bounded forward, nose low, tail stiff. Daniel gathered Emily tight and stumbled after him, boots sinking deep with every step. His muscles screamed, his chest burned, but he kept moving, whispering into Emily's damp hair, "Hold on. Just a little longer." The boathouse loomed ahead, its roof caved but its walls still standing. Shadow clawed at the snow blocking the entrance, barking furiously. Daniel kicked through, forcing a gap wide enough to crawl inside. It was dark, but the wind dulled instantly. The silence inside felt like salvation. Daniel laid Emily on a pile of old tarps, then yanked open his pack with trembling fingers. He pulled out an emergency thermal blanket, wrapping it around her. He cracked heat packs, tucking them under her arms and against her chest. Her eyelids fluttered, a whisper slipping out. Bright? Daniel forced a smile. That's heat, Em. That's you fighting. Shadow lay across her legs, pressing down, his tail curling over her side. His chest rose in steady rhythm, warmth seeping into her through sheer will. Daniel sat close, rubbing her arms, keeping her moving. He pulled her tiny hands to his mouth, breathing warm air into them again and again. His lips burned with cold, but he didn't stop. Minutes stretched into hours. The storm battered the boathouse, snow sliding down the roof, beams groaning. Daniel's own body shook violently, exhaustion and frost gnawing at him. But every time he faltered, Shadow's eyes met his, steady, glowing, relentless. Don't stop, those eyes said. She's not gone yet. Emily coughed suddenly, a weak, sputtering sound. Her chest rose in a sharper gasp, air finally reaching deeper into her lungs. Daniel's heart slammed. He pressed her tighter. That's it, Em. That's breathing. You hear me? You're still here. Her lips parted, trembling. Dog. Daniel's throat tightened. He looked at Shadow. He's here. He never left. The shepherd licked her hand, tail thumping softly against the tarp. For the first time since the ice cracked, Daniel let out a shaky breath. The river had tried to bury her. The storm had tried to freeze her. But Shadow had refused to stop digging, refused to let silence win. And now, against every odd, Emily's whisper was back. The storm hammered the boathouse like a fist. Wind howled through the broken rafters, dragging snow inside in thin, hissing streams. The tarps rattled with every gust, but the fragile shelter still held, for now. Emily lay bundled in the thermal blanket, her breathing shallow but steadier. Shadow pressed against her legs, his chest rising with hers, his eyes never closing. Daniel crouched beside them, rubbing her arms, watching color slowly creep back into her lips. You're fighting, Em, he whispered. That's what matters. Don't stop now. Her eyelids fluttered, a faint word spilling out. Warm. Daniel smiled faintly despite the ache in his chest. That's Shadow. He's not letting go. The shepherd wagged his tail once, slow, before lowering his muzzle to her cheek. But then, he froze. His ears twitched sharply, tail stiffening. A growl rippled low in his throat, vibrating against the tarp. His eyes locked on the door, half buried under snow, rattling faintly with the storm's rhythm. Daniel tensed instantly. What is it? Boy! Shadow's growl deepened, louder, warning. He rose slowly, stepping in front of Emily, hackles bristling. His body coiled, ready to spring. Then it came. A knock. 3 slow, heavy thuds against the wooden frame. Daniel's blood ran cold. No rescue team would be out here, not in this storm, not this deep by the river. He pulled his knife free, crouching low. His voice was sharp, steady. "Who's there?" Silence. Only the wind, screaming. Then, a voice. Muffled, cracked, carried by the storm. "Please, let me in." Emily stirred weakly at the sound, whispering. "Someone?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Stay down, Em." Shadow barked violently, teeth flashing, tail stiff. His entire body screamed, "Don't open it." Daniel pressed his ear to the wall, straining past the roar of the storm. The voice came again, faint, almost swallowed by the wind. "Cold, please." Every instinct screamed trap. He'd heard voices like that before, tones too even, too rehearsed. War zones had taught him the difference between desperation and deception. He glanced at Shadow. The shepherd's snarl was answer enough. Still, the knocks came again. Louder this time. More insistent. Daniel looked at Emily. Her tiny hand reached toward him from the blanket, trembling. "Help them?" His throat tightened. He wanted to. God knew he wanted to. But Shadow's growl never faltered, and in this storm, he trusted the dog's judgment over his own heart. He called out again, voice hard as ice. "Step back from the door." No answer. Just the creak of snow shifting on the roof. Then, faintly, footsteps crunching away into the storm. Daniel stayed frozen, knife ready, breath held, until Shadow's growl faded. Only then did the shepherd return to Emily's side, curling back against her, though his eyes still flicked to the door every few seconds. Daniel's chest heaved. He whispered low, almost to himself. "Not everyone the storm carries to your door is meant to be saved." Emily drifted back into shallow sleep, her hand tangled in Shadow's fur. The dog licked her knuckles once, then lowered his head, watching the door with unyielding eyes. Outside, the wind screamed, furious at being denied. Inside, the fight for warmth continued, but a new truth lingered heavy in the air: the storm wasn't their only enemy. The storm howled outside the boathouse, battering the walls with fists of ice. Inside, the fire's glow flickered weakly, shadows crawling across the tarps and broken beams. Emily stirred in her blanket cocoon, Shadow pressed tight against her, his chest a furnace against the freezing air. Daniel sat on his haunches, knife still in his hand, eyes locked on the door. Hours had passed since the knocks faded, but his pulse hadn't slowed. The storm could kill in silence, but sometimes silence was worse. Shadow's ears pricked suddenly. He stiffened, tail rising, a growl humming low in his throat. Daniel tightened his grip on the knife. "You hear him again?" The shepherd's growl deepened, vibrating through the floorboards. Then, faintly, footsteps. Crunch. Pause. Crunch again. Daniel rose slowly, every nerve alight. He moved closer to the door, pressing his shoulder against the frame. Snow shifted outside, heavy and deliberate. "Please," the voice was back. Louder this time, clearer. A man's voice. "Open. I'm freezing." Shadow lunged at the door, barking savagely, claws scraping against the wood. His fury rattled the hinges. Daniel called out, voice sharp. "Step into the light where I can see you." The voice cracked back, desperate. "I can't, the storm, just let me in." Emily whimpered faintly from her blanket. "Help." Daniel's gut twisted. Every instinct screamed no, but the sound of a human voice in the storm carried its own weight. He braced himself, nodding once to Shadow. "Guard." The shepherd planted himself in front of Emily, every hair on his back raised, his body trembling with rage. His teeth glinted in the firelight, ready to strike. Daniel pulled the latch. The door blew inward with a blast of snow, the gale rushing him like claws. A figure collapsed inside, coughing, sprawling onto the frozen floor. The man rolled onto his back, gasping. His beard was caked with frost, his coat torn, his hands bleeding. He looked like the storm had chewed him up and spat him out. Shadow snarled, leaping forward, only stopping when Daniel snapped the command. "Stay!" The shepherd froze but didn't lower his teeth. His growl filled the air like thunder. Daniel crouched, knife steady. "Name?" The man coughed, dragging his scarf down. "Earl. Earl Tanner. Farm, north side." Roof gave way. "Been walking since. Thought I was done for." Daniel studied him. The details fit, but his eyes, those darting, restless eyes, told another story. They flit from the fire to Emily to Shadow, calculating, measuring. Emily stirred, her weak voice trembling. "Who's that?" Daniel brushed her damp hair back. "Just another traveler." Earl forced a shaky smile. "She's strong. Stronger than most. Reminds me of my niece." Daniel didn't answer. He sat back slowly, knife still in hand. His instincts hadn't dulled in war, and they weren't failing him now. Shadow growled again, inching closer, his muzzle hovering inches from Earl's leg. Earl flinched. "Call him off." Daniel's voice was cold. "If he wanted you gone, you'd already be bleeding. He doesn't warn without cause." The roof above groaned under the storm's weight, snow hissing down through the cracks. The wind screamed louder, demanding to bury them all. But inside the boathouse, the real tension was no longer the storm, it was the man who had just crawled through their door. The fire in the dented barrel burned low, its glow barely pushing the shadows back. Snow slipped steadily through the cracked roof, hissing as it landed on the coals. Emily lay curled in the thermal blanket, her lips less blue now, her breathing steady but fragile. Shadow never left her side. His chest pressed against her legs, his ears twitching at every sound. Earl Tanner sat hunched near the fire, rubbing his hands together with jerky, nervous movements. His beard dripped meltwater, his eyes too wide, darting from Emily to Shadow to Daniel. He muttered constantly, low words tumbling from his lips like a chant. Daniel's soldier's instincts prickled. He leaned forward slowly, knife still resting in his palm. "What are you saying?" Earl froze for a fraction of a second, then forced a shaky laugh. "Prayers. Just prayers. Habit, I guess." Daniel's jaw tightened. He'd heard prayers before, on battlefields, in burned villages, whispered by men who had nothing left. They didn't sound like this. Shadow rumbled deep in his chest, eyes locked on Earl. His hackles rose higher, lips pulling back just enough to flash his teeth. Emily stirred, whispering weakly. "Dog." Daniel soothed her, brushing damp hair from her forehead. "He's here, Em. He's watching." Her tiny hand clutched Shadow's fur even in sleep. The shepherd licked her knuckles once, but his gaze never left Earl. Daniel straightened, voice harder now. "You said you came from the North Farm?" Earl's hands trembled. "Yes." Roof caved in. "Lost everything." Daniel's tone sharpened. The north stretch was evacuated 2 days before the storm hit. Every barn, every house. No one left. Earl blinked too fast. His throat worked, words stumbling. I stayed. Foolish. Didn't want to abandon my land." Daniel didn't move, but his eyes narrowed. "Or you stayed because you had nowhere else to go." Shadow barked suddenly, sharp and furious, lunging forward until the rope snapped taut. His teeth snapped inches from Earl's boot. Earl scrambled back, hands raised. Call him off. Daniel's voice cut like steel. If he meant to end you, you'd already be bleeding. He doesn't warn without reason. Earl swallowed hard, muttering again. His gaze flicked toward Emily, then away, too quickly. Daniel shifted his knife, the blade catching the weak firelight. His voice was low, cold. The storm isn't the only thing testing us tonight. Don't give me another reason to choose between you and her. Earl tried to smile, but it twisted into something hollow. I'm just a man trying to live, same as you. Daniel didn't believe him. Neither did Shadow. The storm wailed against the boathouse, snow piling higher against the walls, beams groaning under the weight. But inside, the greater storm was the one crouched 10 feet from the fire, muttering to himself, carrying secrets that stank of danger. Shadow growled again, deep and certain. And Daniel knew, before the night was over, the shepherd's instincts would prove the truth. The first warning came as a shudder. The roof above groaned, wood snapping under the weight of snow. A long crack split across the beams, spilling powder down onto the fire. The flames hissed, sputtering weakly. Daniel's head shot up instantly. He didn't need a second sign. The boathouse was collapsing. Move, he barked. Shadow leapt to his feet, tail stiff, barking furiously at the door. His entire body trembled with urgency, demanding they leave now. Emily stirred, her weak voice drifting from the blankets. Falling? Daniel scooped her up, wrapping her tighter in the thermal cover. Not yet. We're moving before it does. Earl scrambled upright, his face pale. You'll kill us out there. Daniel's eyes flashed. Stay and you'll bury yourself alive. The roof groaned again, a heavy beam sagging lower. Snow poured through like sand from a broken hourglass. Daniel clipped the rope to Shadow's harness. Trail, boy. The shepherd lunged at the door, paws clawing at the snow. Daniel shoved with his shoulder, forcing it open. The storm screamed back into the room, a wall of white and ice clawing across their faces. Emily whimpered against his chest. Daniel lowered his voice to her ear. Breathe slow, Em. Just hold on to me. Shadow bounded into the blizzard, his body carving through the drifts. The rope stretched taut, their lifeline through the chaos. Daniel followed, muscles burning, boots sinking deep. Earl stumbled behind, gasping curses, his voice barely audible over the wind. Snow swallowed the world, turning trees and riverbank into shifting ghosts. Daniel leaned into the gale, each step a battle. His breath came in ragged bursts, his eyes stinging with frozen lashes. Shadow barked once, sharp, then veered left. Daniel followed, squinting through the whiteout. Tall black pines loomed ahead, their trunks swaying under the storm's weight. The line of trees. Relief sparked in his chest. Good boy. Follow the line. The gale dulled slightly under the canopy, snow swirling instead of stabbing. Still brutal, but survivable. Shadow stayed close to the trunks, weaving a steady path, his tail rigid like a compass needle. Emily stirred, whispering faintly. Trees. Daniel pressed his cheek to her damp hair. That's right. They'll take us where we need to go. Behind them, Earl collapsed to his knees, gasping. I can't go farther. Daniel whipped around, fury burning through his exhaustion. Get up. I'll only slow you. Earl shouted hoarsely. His face twisted in panic, or something darker. Leave me here, or we'll all die. Shadow barked violently, straining forward. His urgency set it plain, no stopping. Daniel grabbed Earl by the arm, yanking him to his feet. You move, or you freeze. Your choice. Earl stumbled forward, his eyes flicking too quickly to Emily, then to Shadow. Daniel didn't like the look, hungry, calculating. He filed it away, jaw tightening. Minutes dragged like hours. The storm clawed at them, trying to tear them apart. Daniel's thighs burned, his chest heaved, every step an act of defiance. Emily's heartbeat fluttered faintly against him, fragile but present. Then, Shadow froze. His body stiffened, ears pricked. He barked once, sharp and urgent, jerking the rope to the west. Through the blur of snow, Daniel saw it, half-buried stone steps leading downward, a cellar mouth yawning black under the drifts. Earl's face lit with sudden frenzy. There! Shelter! We're saved! He staggered toward it, pointing wildly. Daniel stopped cold. His instincts tightened like a fist. The cellar was wrong, silent, dark, no glow, no sound. Just emptiness. Shadow growled, teeth bared, tail rigid. He barked furiously at the opening, pulling hard away from it, dragging Daniel west. Emily whimpered, her lips trembling. Don't! Daniel's breath hissed through his teeth. The storm had tricks, twisting shadows into salvation. But Shadow never lied. He turned his back on the cellar, clutching Emily tighter. We follow the dog. Not the dark. Earl's eyes flashed wild, torn between rage and despair. You'll doom us all. But Daniel didn't look back. He pressed into the storm, trusting Shadow's compass, knowing the only way through was to trust the one who had already dug her from the ice. The half-buried stone steps yawned black under the snow, the cellar mouth like a wound torn into the earth. Wind hissed across it, carrying no warmth, no glow, no voice, just silence. Earl staggered forward, pointing wildly. His eyes gleamed with fevered hope. There! Shelter! You'll kill her if we don't get inside. Daniel froze, Emily tight in his arms. His soldier's instincts screamed. The place was wrong. Too quiet. Too empty. Shadow felt it too. His hackles rose high, his growl low and rolling like distant thunder. He lunged against the rope, barking savagely, straining away from the cellar. Emily stirred, her lips trembling. Don't! The word chilled Daniel deeper than the storm. Even half-conscious, she felt the danger. He called out sharply, his voice slicing through the gale. Earl! Step back! Earl's face twisted, half fear, half rage. You'd trust a dog over your own eyes? There's shelter there. Warmth. Life. Daniel's voice was hard as steel. I trust him every time. The storm howled, rattling branches, shaking snow loose in avalanches. Earl's shoulders slumped, then his expression shifted, something darker flickered behind his eyes. For just a second, Daniel saw it, not panic, but calculation. He stepped forward slowly, knife still strapped at his belt, voice low. That's not shelter. That's a grave. Shadow barked furiously, spinning toward the west. Through the whiteout, Daniel squinted, and there it was. A spire, faint but undeniable, cutting through the storm. A church steeple. The real sanctuary. Relief slammed into his chest. He grabbed the rope, shouting over the gale. Trail, boy! Take us there! Shadow lunged ahead, dragging the line taut, his paws carving trenches in the drifts. Earl shouted behind them, his voice breaking. No! You'll doom us all. I saw light there, I swear it. Daniel didn't look back. He tightened his hold on Emily, pressing his cheek to her frozen hair. He saw what you didn't. The truth. Emily's lips moved faintly, whispering, found. Daniel's heart throbbed. That's right, Em. Shadow found it. The storm screamed louder, furious at being denied. Snow whirled in violent waves, blinding, battering. But they pressed forward, following the shepherd's compass. Behind them, the cellar mouth sank deeper under the weight of snow, swallowed by the storm. It would never open again. Daniel knew then, Miller's Creek wasn't just fighting cold. The storm itself had teeth, dressing graves as shelters, twisting shadows into hope. But tonight, they hadn't followed the storm's lies. They had followed the only voice that never betrayed them. The dogs. The storm clawed at them as if trying to drag them back to the false cellar, but Shadow tore forward with unshakable purpose. His paws punched into the drifts, tail stiff as a compass needle, every bark a command to keep moving. Through the whiteout, the steeple grew clearer. Blackwood half buried in snow, cross still jutting defiantly against the storm. The church of Miller's Creek had endured what houses and barns could not. Daniel's chest heaved, his legs trembling with every step. Emily clung weakly to his coat, her tiny breaths hot against his chest, fading but present. Shadow reached the church doors first, clawing furiously at the snow piled high. His barks echoed off the walls, urgent and sharp. Daniel stumbled to his knees, shifting Emily in his arms. Almost there, Em. Just a little more. Earl collapsed beside him, coughing, his face twisted with something Daniel couldn't name. Fear? Resentment? Both. With one final shove, Daniel forced the heavy door open. A burst of warm light spilled into the blizzard, lanterns, fire, voices. Gasps rang out from within. Figures rushed forward, faces pale but alive, eyes wide with disbelief. Get them inside. Daniel stumbled through the threshold, nearly collapsing under the weight of exhaustion. Hands reached out, pulling Emily from his arms with care, wrapping her in blankets. She's alive, a woman cried. Blankets stoked the stove. Shadow shoved past Daniel, bounding straight to Emily's side. He pressed his muzzle against her cheek, tail thumping once, protective and proud. Her eyelids fluttered open, lips parting in a fragile whisper. Dog. Daniel's throat tightened. He dropped to one knee beside her cot. He's here, Em. He never left. Shadow licked her hand, curling protectively against her legs, refusing to move even as medics bustled around. The survivors crowded close, awe and gratitude in their eyes. A volunteer leader stepped forward, her coat ragged but her voice steady. You carried her out of the river, through the storm. You brought her back from death. Daniel shook his head, placing his hand on Shadow's harness. Not me. Him. He heard what no one else could. The leader's gaze softened, her voice reverent. Then it's his name we'll remember. Children peeked from blankets, eyes wide at the shepherd who had pulled life from the storm. One whispered, that's the dog that hears the cries no one else can. Daniel almost smiled. No. He hears through the silence. Earl slumped in the corner, silent, muttering under his breath. His eyes darted, but no one paid him heed. The story now belonged to the girl and the dog. As the wind howled outside, rattling the church walls, Daniel finally let his body relax. He sat beside Emily, shadow pressed close, the storm's fury fading behind thick stone. For the first time since the river swallowed her, Daniel allowed himself to breathe. Emily lived. Because Shadow never stopped digging. By dawn, the storm broke. Not with silence, but with a long, ragged sigh, as if the sky itself had grown tired of screaming. The winds eased, the snow settled, and pale light stretched across Miller's Creek. What remained was a world reshaped, roads erased, roofs crushed, fences gone. But one steeple stood proud above the whiteness, the church that had held fast. Inside, warmth hummed against stone walls. Lanterns burned low, survivors huddled close, and the air carried something the storm had tried to smother, hope. Daniel sat slumped against a pillar, his body heavy with exhaustion. Emily lay beside him on a cot, wrapped in blankets, her cheeks flushed with fragile color. Her breaths were steady now, no longer whispers but full, even rhythms. Shadow curled at her side, muzzle resting on her arm. His ears twitched even in sleep, as though guarding her dreams. Dried blood still stained his paws from clawing at the ice, but his chest rose strong and steady. Emily stirred, blinking against the lantern glow. Her small voice, soft but stronger than before, drifted up. "Morning?" Daniel leaned forward, brushing damp hair from her forehead. "Yeah, The ice let go." She turned her head weakly, her hand finding Shadow's fur. "He stayed." Daniel's throat tightened. "Always." The shepherd thumped his tail once, slow and certain, without opening his eyes. Around them, the survivors began to stir. Families pressed together, whispering prayers. A boy stared at Shadow with wide eyes, tugging his mother's sleeve. "Mama, that's the dog who pulled her from the river." The mother nodded, tears streaking her cheeks. "Yes. The one who heard when no one else did." The volunteer leader approached, her coat patched and face weary but steady. She knelt beside Daniel, her eyes shining. "You carried her through death's door. You and him. That's something none of us will ever forget." Daniel shook his head slowly, resting his hand on Shadow's harness. "I followed. He led." The leader smiled faintly. "Then we'll follow his story. Every child here will know it." Shadow stirred at that, lifting his head. His amber eyes locked on Emily, then swept the room, alert again. Always watching. Always listening. Emily coughed softly, then whispered with a fragile smile. "The dog, he found me." Daniel pressed his forehead to hers, whispering back, "And he always will." The storm outside had buried houses, broken lives, stolen breath. But in the end, it hadn't taken her. Because a German shepherd refused to stop digging. Because he had heard the cry that the world tried to silence. By noon, rescuers arrived with sleds and ropes, breaking paths through the snow. Survivors filed out into the pale sunlight, squinting, blinking at the world the storm had left behind. Daniel carried Emily in his arms, wrapped snug against his chest. Shadow bounded ahead, leaping into the drifts, his body alive with energy despite his wounds. The first breath of clean morning air hit Daniel like fire. Cold still, sharp still, but alive. Emily squinted at the brightness, her voice faint. "Bright." Daniel's chest tightened, and he kissed her damp hair. "Bright means alive, Em." Shadow barked once, sharp and triumphant, his voice echoing across the frozen world. Survivors turned, watching him, their faces breaking into smiles for the first time in days. And there, in the ruins of Miller's Creek, a legend was born, not of soldiers or storms, but of a shepherd who heard what no one else could. The dog who wouldn't stop digging.